Wendy, can somebody, because I can't do. Hello, how are you? We are live with Mariah Crenshaw in front of the East Cleveland City Hall. This is the press conference that we have let everyone know that was occurring. And I'm going to just set this up and just let this play. And I will try to make sure it doesn't fall over. I just need somebody to be right here so they can.
If anyone has questions,
there are people come in. Hello, everyone. I really can't address.
Don't worry about that. Just look at this. Okay. All right. Okay. So, if everyone is ready, we are ready to get started. Good? Everybody good? Okay. My name is Mariah Crenshaw, MariahCrenshaw, and I am with the organization Chasing Justice, LLC. What we do is we go through public records and we create reports. This is our fourth report. We have done reports on 3 judges, and we have looked at all public information, and we compile reports to tell you how the judges are functioning in the courtrooms, if they're following rules of procedure. And in this instance, we took a really good forensic look at the East Cleveland Police Department. Through public records, or I should say lack of public records, through the East Cleveland Police Department, we were not able to come up with information that is vital to public safety. And so what we have relied on is, okay, we have relied on records from sheriff's departments, from smaller municipalities, including disbanded police departments, to gain understanding and knowledge of the backgrounds of the East Cleveland police officers. And what we have found is absolutely astounding. The first thing I want to talk about is the East Cleveland Police Department did not provide us current documentation for training for police officers. And so in looking at the OPATA, and if no one knows what that is, that's the Ohio Peace Officer Training Certification Department, we looked at the records that were submitted to them for training, and it was absent of required training that they're supposed to have, which is mandated by the state legislature. What we also found was that under the current Attorney General's tenure, no letters have been sent out which tell the officers under the Ohio Administrative Code 109.1-12-12 Section F, where peace officers are behind in training. They either need a refresher course to take, or they have to get caught up on their mandated hours. And what we found is that officers are not caught up. There are officers who are collectively 17 years behind in their training. There are officers that are 10 years collectively behind in their training, that we have no record from the Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy to certify that these officers are supposed to be on the street. So I refer you to the first page that I gave you. If you look at the bottom paragraph of that one pager, you'll see the Ohio Administrative Code clearly says that persons that are in break of service and not being compliant with your hours is in break of service. When you are not compliant, you are not to carry a firearm and you are not to engage in law enforcement. And I'm going to equate this the best way I can. The best way I can equate it is, if you have a driver's license and you have insurance and it expires, you cannot be on the streets legally operating as a driver. Are you still a driver? Yes, but you are not a lawful driver. You are a suspended driver to a sense. And so that is the same equate that I want to use when we're talking about the Ohio Administrative Code, where officers know if they are not compliant with their hours, they are not supposed to be engaged in law enforcement. They are not supposed to be arresting people. They're not supposed to be testifying in court. They are not supposed to be carrying firearms. They're not supposed to be issuing tickets. They are not to be engaged. And this is not being enforced through the administrative code by our current Attorney General, Michael DeWine. So that's a problem. So I'm going to try to get through these talking points. If anyone has any questions, I'm sure I will answer them as I'm speaking. Let's see. Okay. We have discovered that there is no process within our state legislation or otherwise, which requires periodic audits of police departments to support officers have been compliant with mandatory training. There is a spreadsheet that is sent at the end of the year with an officer's name and a yes or no if they comply. But there's no evidence attached to it to show that these officers have actually been compliant. And in some of the surrounding departments that I've looked at, they did keep supporting documentation. East Cleveland has not kept documentation to support that these officers took the training classes. There's nothing in the files that they have supplied to us to indicate that they are compliant with their required mandatory training. East Cleveland did not retain accurate and up-to-date files on peace officers. Multiple public information requests have been put in. We currently have a writ of mandamus filed with the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas to obtain documents that they are supposed to be retaining. They have not given us the information we've asked for, and when I've asked for some files, they told me they don't exist. That is not acceptable. Personnel disciplinary records are void of field officer reports for persons that are transitioning from basic training or auxiliary positions to being the status of a police officer. Personnel files are void of required refresher courses documentation. There is at least one person right now currently serving as an officer investigator within the East Cleveland Police Department that is not commissioned to be a police officer in East Cleveland. He only holds a commission in University Circle Police Department, and he is operating without an appointment in the city of East Cleveland, and we would like to know why that person is operating, writing tickets, and operating as a police officer here. Let's see, what else do we have here? There are persons who have long histories of violating citizens' constitutional rights, excessive force from correctional facilities involving youth, sexual allegations, and drinking on the clock. One of the persons was passed over by the city of Cleveland and Bedford Heights because of conduct displayed while working in another sheriff's department. The same individual was deemed unreliable by the district court Judge Solomon Oliver that currently oversights the city of Cleveland's consent decree. This individual has undergone lie detector tests and according to public records has failed miserably. He is not a credible person. And this person is also approximately 16 hours out of compliance, and he should not be carrying a firearm, and he should not be operating as an officer in the city of East Cleveland or anywhere else. There are persons currently with the department that have been terminated from other departments for insubordination, misuse of the NCIC leads database, dishonesty, and malfeasance. Again, this is all based on public information requests. We have documentation to show everything that is being stated. We have rosters supplied by the Opata Department reflecting that the city of East Cleveland has 63 peace officers assigned to the city's police department. We are aware that only approximately 30 persons are actually employed by the city. We are also further concerned that at least 25 of those persons are more than 3 years out of compliance under the Ohio Administrative Code. They are not supposed to be carrying firearms and operating as a law enforcement officer pursuant to the Ohio Administrative Code 109. We today put in a public information request with the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office for all letters that have been received from the Opata Department that mandates a cease and desist by non-compliant officers in conjunction with all cases, specifically non-compliant persons have arrested in the last decade. So we want a list of all of these officers, and we want to know what cases that they have been involved in where they have arrested people, and under the administrative code they did not have authority to arrest anyone or carry a firearm at the time. And as we know, judges, criminal defense attorneys, prosecutors rely on police to be accurate, up to date, and to give correct information so that people, when they are being brought into the system, that they are able to get a fair trial. We have officers, quote officers, that are not supposed to be operating and not carrying firearms, and they are giving information to the police impersonating police officers.
Wow.
I have currently filed 2 written mandamuses with the city of Cleveland because one of the officers, the one I was in reference to, that is only commissioned to be appointed in University Circle Police Department, that individual, his file is not being released by the city of Cleveland, and we want that file. We want to know what is in that file that could actually shed some light on why the city of Cleveland did not continue to keep this person.
To watch this, Mr. Barkley has
we have also requested time cards for certain persons that are more than 3 years out of compliance. We want time cards to determine how much taxpayer money has been paid to police officers who are currently not compliant with the Ohio Administrative Code. They are taking taxpayer money and they are not supposed to be operating as police officers. We want to know who they are and how much money have they received. In 2001, the Ohio Attorney General Betty Montgomery wrote an opinion regarding training using videotapes. What we found is that several officers are now taking the EOPATA online classes, and they are not going to classes where they're actually receiving instruction from teachers, certified trainers. When Betty Montgomery wrote her opinion in 2001, her opinion stated that they could use that as long as a certified trained instructor was used for those courses. We have information, again, from surrounding municipalities. We have information from sheriff's departments outside. I want to commend the Sheffield Police Department for keeping excellent records. Lindale Police Department, excellent records. Lucas County Police Department, CMHA, excellent records that we were able to rely on and be able to pull enough information together to bring this to your attention. We want to change the narrative of, was the officer in fear of his life at the time he shot someone? The question now needs to be, in the state of Ohio, was a police officer in compliance with the Ohio Administrative Code 109 at the time of any type of misconduct, police shooting, or whatever it is? I do not have the names of the officers who shot the young man about a month ago here in East Cleveland. I would like to know what those officers' names are so we can compare and see if they are in compliance with the Ohio Administrative Code, because if they weren't supposed to be carrying firearms, we need to know if the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor is going to be bringing formal charges for felonious assault against those officers.
Wow.
Probably not.
Question.
We're going to ask. It doesn't matter if he does or not. We're still going to find out because we're changing the narrative. No longer was that officer in fear of his life at that moment and had to make a choice. Now we want to know, was that officer under the Ohio Administrative Code supposed to be carrying a firearm, and was that officer supposed to be engaging in law enforcement activities?
Right.
And what we see here is a pattern in East Cleveland City Police Department that there are several officers, and I would say 3/4 of the officers that are here are not in compliance with the OAC.
Question.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
I don't know your name, but anyway.
Mariah Crenshaw, sir.
I'm sorry.
Mariah Crenshaw.
Okay, I'm amazed. I heard what you said. But are you cognizant that East Cleveland is a home rule city? We have the authority to make laws and what have you. And if they are not, only time that the state Ohio Revised Code come into play is when we are silenced. So I don't know whether you have done the research as to the norms that we have, and I heard you say in reference to the documentation that they did not have, and which they should have documentation. But I just want you to be cognizant when you made mention of other municipalities. We are, everyone here took an oath, operate under the charter, of the city of East Cleveland. And as I said, we are a home rule city, which gives us the authority to make norms of what have you, as long as they do not conflict with the Ohio Revised Code. And the only time the Ohio Revised Code come into play is when we are silent. Then the Ohio Revised Code, we refer to the Ohio Revised Code.
I am very cognizant of that, and again, I'm going to reiterate this. This is not something that your home rule dictates. This is something that every police officer in the state of Ohio is required to have mandated training, which is set by the state legislature. That is what we are discussing. You do not have home rule on determining whether or not they should have training or what type of training. It is mandated by the state of Ohio under the Ohio Administrative Code that if those officers are not in compliance, they are not to carry firearms and they are not to be engaged in law enforcement.
To respond to that, we do have training or requirements in the charter and the law here in East Cleveland. Now, whether they are following that, that's the problem.
And that's what this is about, sir.
Well, I'm just,
I need to, I'm Nathaniel Martin. I'm a councilman in East Cleveland. I also chair the Health and Safety Committee. My concern is compliance. Training is essential. Being a police officer, you have people's life at stake.
Right.
So we must be in compliance.
That's right.
We must. So I'm here saying that if there's open records request for information, she should be provided that. If our officers are not in compliance, then we need to deal with that. This is nothing to take lightly. They have to be in compliance. It's like a social worker or an attorney. They have to get their training. They have to get to keep their licenses. The same here. You have to get your firearm training, etc. And this is in the Ohio Administrative Code.
Correct.
So this is nothing in pie in the sky. So I'm asking that we be made aware of factually if our officers are in compliance with the Ohio Administrative Code. And if they're not, we need to deal with that. Thank you. Okay?
Again, there must be supporting documentation. What I have found in other police departments is that when they submit the rosters, I was able to take their rosters and line it up to a police officer's file and see the certificates contained in the file which supported the training. I don't see that here. I don't see any kind of information that's being provided to us which reflects that these officers have the training. And also I want to throw out too that I spoke with former Mayor Eric Brewer, and I discussed this with him very detailed about the roster that is submitted at the end of the year. And the roster at the end of the year, which states the officer's name, birth date, and whether they were compliant, there's a yes or a no column. They are reimbursed funding for that. Former Mayor Eric Brewer said he never heard of it. He never heard of it. So everyone who knows how anal he is about having records and having things verified, if he didn't know it existed, that is a red flag for me. Because again, there's nothing to support what was submitted to the state that the city received funds for reimbursing for officers' training. There's nothing that I see which reflects that they had the training. So there has to be some forensic examinations of records. Yes.
So I remember in a conversation that was had with you earlier, and it was regarding a conversation that you had with someone from the state, and they stated that they relied upon an honor system.
Yes, correct.
And so the fact that a city is able to send that information in, or to just say, hey, I'm in compliance, and that be accepted without proof, is very troubling, especially with the fact that we know that we have the many lateral transfers that officers make from one department to the next, which means that not only is this a problem with East Cleveland, but this is more than likely a problem with the city of Cleveland and others which means which this could actually explain perhaps why we're having so many officers do some of the heinous things that they're doing, and it's because of the fact that they're not having the training that they need.
And circumventing the process.
We continue as advocates to say that we want more training for police officers. I want to change that narrative too. We want to make sure that the officers are taking the training that they're required to take. And maybe we will see a lot of this. And also, if we really look and ask Michael DeWine or any attorney general that takes this office to enforce the administrative code and possibly begin to prosecute some of these officers, we may see a decrease in officers pulling their weapons because they're in fear of their lives at that given moment, and they weren't supposed to be on the street to begin with. Yes,
I have a question. I want to piggyback off of what Kareem said. He made an excellent point, but I want to take it even further. What is this going to do when this footage goes out as it's going now? What is this going to, two things. What is this going to do as far as all of the cases that these officers have been engaged in? They have made arrests, there's been convictions, they have shot people, they have arrested people, they have taken drugs, they have planted drugs, the whole 9 yards. What is going to happen to all those cases, to all those people who may be sitting in the jail, who may be in the morgue, who may have had fines levied against them? And also, what is this going to do to policing right now on the streets when the public learns that this officer might not even be in compliance and shouldn't even be having a badge and a gun?
I can't foresee the future, but what I can say is that I would like to admonish Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Michael O'Malley to do a very forensic examination of these officers that are arresting people, have arrested people, the information that's been provided to them, and that he take the proper steps in determining whether or not they are in compliance with the Ohio Administrative Code. Also, this information can be disseminated to criminal defense attorneys so that they're able to look at this information and take it to the courts. And that's another thing for judges who are watching this, that were listening to this. You are relying on compliance. You are coming into the court, you are compliant with your CLEs, the prosecutor is compliant with his CLEs. There is a standard there that law enforcement is not even being questioned as to whether or not they're compliant. So I am admonishing not only the prosecutor, but also the judges who have cases before them now, where the East Cleveland Police Department has been involved and engaged, to make sure that the officers who have brought that information are compliant under the Ohio Administrative Code, and to make sure that if they are not compliant, that they are removed immediately from the police department and their firearms to be surrendered to the police department, because they're not supposed to be carrying them. Friday morning at 9 a.m. we will be in front of the Juvenile Detention Center, and we will release the names of the officers that we know are 3 or more years out of compliance. I hope that if you're able to be there to support us, that you will be there. This document here was given to, if I'm not mistaken, one of the persons in the Chief of Staff in the Law Department was handed these documents with the names of the officers. I am concerned that once this information gets out into the public, that some of these officers that I know have engaged in malfeasance in the community against persons, that they are going to get some kind of backlash. So for their own safety, I admonish the mayor of East Cleveland to remove these individuals immediately from service. He has the names. We will not be responsible for anything, any harm that comes to them, because we have given adequate notice to remove these persons from East Cleveland Police Department. And again, we will be submitting those names on Friday morning at 9 a.m. in front of the Yes, Brandon.
Have you spoken with Brandon King about this issue here in East Cleveland?
I have not spoken with anyone in East Cleveland because of the lack of respect that I have received when I've come into the East Cleveland City Hall. to the way that I've been treated. It's just I don't waste my time. Okay, I'm not into foolishness. I'm about getting down to business. And what I've done is myself and other persons have taken a long forensic look at the documents. We put out over 200 public information requests in which we have compiled this information, and we have more information from other departments than we have from the city of East Cleveland concerning police officers that serve here.
Have you spoken to the law director, Willa Hemmons?
I have spoken to Ms. Hemmons, and Ms. Hemmons, I have to say this, and I say this with the utmost disrespect I could possibly say. I cannot understand how she is a lawyer and she's allowed to.
Wow.
I'm saying it with the utmost disrespect I can possibly say it with. How is she serving the city of East Cleveland when she doesn't know the laws?
Oh, wow. That's scary.
I have emails from Willa Hemmons telling me information I'm requesting I cannot have because it's not public information. I asked for personnel records and disciplinary files, and they most certainly are public records.
Is she quoting the law when she sent
No,
you that
she is
information?
not. No, she is
telling
not.
you that it's not available to you.
She's telling me it's not available. She's giving me excuses on retention. She's giving me excuses on I sent it to her and I should have sent it to her. I should have sent it to someone else. She is an absolute disgrace to the city and to the law and to the legal community. She's an absolute disgrace. I said it, put it out there. She want to talk to me, 216-438-0761. Call. I think she is disgraceful. I think she's absolutely disgraceful.
So what if this is? I think it's indicative of a national problem. What if this is the root cause of all these national killings, cops shooting unarmed people, because all of these cops are actually categorically out of compliance? You know, we can start with their psychological makeup, but they seem to be people who have a desire to become law enforcement, but they're totally ill-trained and ill-equipped to be an officer with a gun and a badge. And maybe that's the root cause across the country, and that is a nightmarish possibility that is probably happening. Yeah.
Chasing Justice has begun what we have dubbed Operation Backdoor. Operation Backdoor is moving across the nation right now amongst advocacy groups dealing with police misconduct. And what we have done is we have shown them how to look into their administrative codes for each particular state and how to send out public information requests to determine whether or not they have the same type of compliance requirements for police officers. Because when we look at cases like Timothy and Melissa, and we look at cases like Tamir and Tanisha, and we look at John Crawford, people within the state of Ohio, Brandon McLeod, were those officers in compliance at the time of those incidents? We've got to change the narrative. The narrative now needs to be whether or not they were in compliance and were they supposed to be carrying weapons and engaged in law enforcement. That's the narrative.
I got one more question for you, Mariah. One more question.
Yes.
My issue right now is the chief of police here and the chief of police all across the country. So the information that you've already provided, you did your thorough research. I thank you for that. My brother Craig Bickerstaff was killed by police. So the issue is, I'm talking about Cleveland now, and I'm very familiar and aware of East Cleveland. When they are not in compliance, is it the responsibility for the chief to make sure of these municipalities that these individuals are in compliance?
Let me ask you this question. What if the chief is out of compliance?
Thank you.
All right.
To answer that it's incumbent upon the administration to see that the laws are followed. And the council may pass the laws, and the administration is to enforce, see that those laws.
But are they enforced though? Are they enforced?
That is the problem. That is it in a nutshell. That we aren't seeing enforcement at the Ohio Attorney General's office, at the OPATA certification department's level. We aren't seeing it in East Cleveland in terms of whether or not they are actually doing the training and being in compliance at the time.
One question, when you applied for, you requested a public record I guess the officers, whom did you request it
Well, that's a good point.
from personnel director or from Mrs. Henry?
I walked in straight upstairs to the prosecutor's office, and I also sent it certified. So it was
She did it
addressed to
correctly.
Mayor Brandon King. It was supposed to have been served over to the correct departments. It was serviced to him so he would be aware of what we were asking for and he would have knowledge. And for instance, as I sent out documentation to other departments, surrounding cities, outside of the county, to other departments, I have received information within 24 hours in a lot of cases. I have received emails back that I've sent to a chief of police, and he says, I don't handle this, but I forward it to the person who does. So it doesn't matter who I gave it to. Right. If I gave it to the wrong person, and they have a duty to forward it. Now, that's another thing. Willa Hemmons sent me an email telling me that I sent it to her, and I shouldn't have sent it to her. I should have sent it to someone else. Make sure I send off future requests to this specific person. Well, she didn't say whether or not she forwarded it.
Wow.
She didn't tell me, you know, I sent her another email. Hey, did you forward it? No response. It's not acceptable in any city when you're dealing with the lives and the safety of American citizens. And we are at a critical time in our country.
Yes, we are.
We're talking about,
baby.
we have criminals on the right, we have out of compliant officers on the left, and we got Putin on top of us.
Oh my God.
Right. And this is a reality.
That's scary.
Right.
This is our reality. And I can say with confidence, I am tired of being an African American
Thank you,
in
baby.
this country
Yes.
and being afraid to drive down the street and
right.
know I can be killed because he was having a bad day and I allegedly ran a red light.
Wow.
I am tired of turning on the television and seeing that African Americans are being gunned down, unarmed, because the officer was in fear of his life.
That's
right. If you are supposed to be out there, and we need to look at this across the country,
Yes.
the administrative codes, we need to know.
Right.
We need to know. Now, my dad was a lawyer. I worked in his office. A lot of you know him, know who he was. Never in all of the years that I was around him did I ever once hear him say, daughter, he wasn't supposed to have been out there anyway because the administrative code said so. He didn't know. And as I'm talking to lawyers, prosecutors, magistrates, people that are in the legal community, they don't know about the Ohio Administrative Code, which requires them not to be engaged in law enforcement and carrying firearms if they're out of compliance.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, and I just want to say this. They're required to have continual legal education. So are you saying that the prosecutors, the magistrates, and the judges don't know about this information?
No. When a police officer walks in their courtroom, there is an assumption that they are compliant with their training. There is an assumption that the chief of police, that the Ohio Attorney General's office has ensured that these officers are compliant. So when Mike DeWine likes to say it's a systemic problem, it's a systemic problem. We have a systemic problem here right now dealing with this. We need to know why they're not red flagged. We need to know why they are still on our streets and they're not in compliance. And that there's no documentation which supports their compliance.
I need to say this. The police department falls under the auspices of the mayor, not the court. And so therefore the court does not, he has his own, or he or she has that separate branch of government. So we have three branches of government. We have the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the administrative branch. So administrative, all of the officers and things of that nature falls under him. It is incumbent upon the mayor to see that the officers that whom are serving at his pleasure is in compliance. That is his responsibility. It's not the court's responsibility. The court feels that those persons legally and in compliance with whatever the norms they have to.
Well, the court is supposed to verify the
judges
compliance.
is backing them up.
They're supposed to verify. Yes, they do.
Well, the chain is broken and the chain needs to be repaired.
And
What we need to
put
be
that on the court.
discussing,
it's happening.
hold on. What we need to be
Go ahead.
discussing again is the fact that there has to be accountability.
True.
Whether that accountability comes from the chief of police, whether it comes from the mayor, whether it comes from the judge. When it's presented to a judge, when it is presented in a court of law, that these officers are not in compliance and they're not supposed to be on the street, the judge needs to make sure
Right.
that persons are compliant and that the testimony they're giving, it can be relied upon.
Well, thank you,
Okay.
Mrs. Crenshaw, Mr. O'Mays. We appreciate you. We're done now, and we're going to answer any questions you have as we discuss.
It's happening in cities where black folks are supposed to be is the mayor and the police chief. That's the cities it's happening in.
Well, this has been a press conference to really
Thank you, Mariah.
Thank
Thank you. Appreciate
corruption
it.
in terms of circumventing
Good job.
Thank you, baby.
OPADA
Always.
rulings
I love
that prevent rogue officers or those applying for positions of authority from jumping the hurdles, from circumventing the process. And that's what we're here about today. The officers who have circumvented the process and becoming cops. Now they have a gun in the bag, and they have been doing all kinds of things in the name, in the power, and the authority of that gun in the bag, and that's what we have just exposed. There'll be more to come. This is off the chain. Police officers on the streets right now.
How do I
must
turn
be
this off,
compliant.
Mariah?
I will do it. We are certainly, yeah, you can just finish it right there. It's kind of bright. But we thank you for tuning in.